Hello, everyone, and welcome to the How the Light Gets In Festival. Thank you for joining for our debate on the unsayable. What we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence, famously claimed the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein in his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, the centenary of which we are celebrating this year. Wittgenstein primarily had in mind the relationship between language and the world, and arguably the very idea of metaphysics. Yet, a century after Wittgenstein's concluding remark, many continue an attempt to uncover and express the ultimate meaning and nature of reality using our all too human language. Have we ignored Wittgenstein's clear message that we cannot express meaningfully how language and our theories relate to the world? Are all our metaphysical descriptions about the nature of reality simply nonsense? Or was Wittgenstein wrong, and can we go on with our quest to uncover the essential character of reality and our relationship to it? To explore the unsayable, we have got three brilliant speakers who I am delighted to present. Joanna Kavenna is a multi-award-winning author who writes about existentialism, class, the nature of truth, and quantum physics. Her latest book, Z, explores the dystopian reality of big tech and the digital meshing of humanity and technology. Hilary Lawson is a philosopher and renowned critic of philosophical realism, best known for his theory of closure, which argues that we close the openness of the world with our thought and language. Ray Tallis is a philosopher, poet, neuroscientist, and physician whose philosophical writing has been informed by his medical expertise. His books include Aping Mankind, Becoming Animal, and his latest, Seeing Ourselves, Reclaiming Humanity from God and Science. Now, to begin this debate, I would like each speaker to give a brief 3-minute presentation of their thoughts on our opening question. Have we ignored Wittgenstein's suggestion that we cannot express meaningfully how language and our theories relate to the world? Ray, would you like to start?
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much indeed. And we begin with Wittgenstein. He himself, ironically, did have a theory initially of the relationship between language and the world. This was his so-called picture theory of propositions. He believed that things that you said could be about things in the world because the things that you said and the things in the world shared some properties. This was a so-called picture theory of propositions, but what they shared was a logical form. He, however, rejected that and acknowledged that language, in fact, had many ways of relating to the world. After all, there were different parts of speech. You know, a dog relates to the world in one way and the word the in quite another. And speech served different functions, something that was picked up by the philosopher J.L. Austin, who didn't actually entirely approve of Wittgenstein, but some of you may be familiar with his emphasis on speech as being the source of acts. So much for the relationship between language and the world. Well, what about theories relating to the world? Well, it seems in principle rather unlikely there's going to be a general theory connecting theories with the world, a general theory about the relationship between theories and the world. There are, after all, different sorts of theory and different sorts of world. I mean, there are physical theories about the physical world, and the very notion of the physical world may be rather naive. And then there are social theories about the social realm. So there's unlikely to be an overall theory about how those two relate, or how indeed they fail to relate. We also have a problem that certainly has preoccupied me, that as theories become more general, so they sort of lose not only particularity, which by definition they do by being general, but also content. They become almost exsanguinated. Measurement, for example, reduces what is out there to numbers. So we end up with a mathematical portrait of the world, which is, as I said, essentially exsanguinated. I mean, E equals mc squared is a very, very fine equation, but it's not exactly, as it were, a good description of the world. It's hardly the description of an enticing tourist destination. And having said that, we can have a distinction between theories that seem to be true or truer and theories that are clearly wrong or less right. And there are at least two criteria for making that distinction. First of all, true or truer theories have much greater predictive power. And secondly, true or truer theories enable us to manipulate the world directly or indirectly through artifacts based on those theories. In other words, they greatly enhance our agency.
That's great, Ray. We'll go back to that. How about you, Joanna? What do you think about the question? Have we ignored Wittgenstein's suggestion that we cannot express meaningfully how language and our theories relate to the world?
Thank you, Maria. Well, so I don't know who we is in the question. Of course, it has this kind of echoes and this past within it. And this brings me to Borges's definition of language, which is a set of symbols whose use among its speakers assumes a shared past. And I think that's a really fundamental aspect of language. Whenever we make a proposition, it has all of these kind of echoes, associations, buried traces. So for that reason and many others, I would ask personally for lots of angst about language. I think the question suggests perhaps we've lost a certain amount of angst about language. A sort of love angst, maybe, and that's the kind of situation in literature, which is the sort of thing that I kind of work in. The situation's very odd. You know, each one of us is a unique individual speaking a communal ancient language. We're given no choice. We're inducted into this system of murmurs and squeaks from birth. And it's a system that goes back to millennia, long buried ages. And our consciousness co-evolves with our acquisition of language. So there's not a kind of pristine original self that we can return to that can be stripped of this language. So we talk about language from deep within it and with language deep within us as well. And to use another metaphor stolen from Borges, it's a labyrinth, you could say, which he steals from the Greeks, of course. It's a man-made contrivance of great power. It doesn't give us a God's eye view, I don't believe. By using words, we don't become deities. You know, words are good, but they're not that good. Also, words are not enough. There's more in 15 minutes of consciousness than the whole of Shakespeare, as Stevenson said. And I think a tautly controlled language, a rigid propagandist language, can bind thoughts. And you see that in regimes that seek to prevent things being said or even thought. So we need unmolested language, as Toni Morrison said. And it's very interesting about Wittgenstein. You could say, as Ray was saying, you know, early Wittgenstein perhaps is angst, and maybe late Wittgenstein there's more love. You know, he says that meaning is primarily use, or maybe I'm trying to now bind Wittgenstein into my love angst theory of language. But I'll stop now because I'm pushing at my definition.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joanna. And Hilary, have we ignored Wittgenstein's suggestion that we cannot express meaningfully how language and our theories relate to the world? What do you think?
Well, as Joe was saying, I think it depends on who the we is there. I think it's certainly true that in a large chunk of the academy, that the Wittgensteinian conclusion that we're not able to describe the relationship between language and the world has been ignored. I think that probably is the case, as realism is maybe the dominant story, and that's certainly not to have taken his conclusion on board. I think it's worth have a slightly different version than the way that Ray conveyed the shift in Wittgenstein's position. It seems to me that his position where he said we couldn't talk about the relationship between language and the world directly followed from his early outlook. So he set about trying to provide an account of that relationship, and certainly in my view it is one of the best attempts at trying to do that. But he concludes that it's not possible. And he includes that it's not possible for underlying logical grounds, that language cannot somehow step outside of itself to catch sight of the relationship to something that is other than language. It's got no way of doing that. And so that's where he ends up. Now, however, I don't buy Wittgenstein's conclusion that therefore we should just give up on metaphysics, because he does hold a metaphysical position in his later writing, I would argue. So that the only way we understand his writing, like the Investigations, is to impute to him an overall philosophical view, namely that we're wandering around in a language game. Now that's a metaphysical view. It's to stand back and have seen humans on the one side in this world of language and the world somewhere else, and to have somehow described how it ultimately is. So I don't think that Wittgenstein really does carry through on his claim to have abandoned metaphysics. But nevertheless, I think the traditional notion of metaphysics that existed pre the linguistic turn, we can't return to. And in that sense, I think we have forgotten some of those insights of the linguistic turn precisely because it leads us into a very difficult space.
That's very interesting. I suppose one of the questions we will be exploring today is what is metaphysics? But to begin with our first theme, now that we have a guide to what your positions are, we seem to use language to navigate the world we find ourselves in. Yet, many argue, language does not connect to the world in any secure or concrete way. In fact, as you said, Ray, Wittgenstein's Tractatus explores that very question. What is the connection between language and the world? And Joanna, would you like to start with this one?
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.